Hey everyone, it's the Monday Master here, and today I'm going to walk you through the different options you have to track time in Monday.com, as well as show you how to implement these options. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Monday.com guides and time-saving tips that I'll continue to release in the future. To start, we're going to create a board from a template to work off of for the first couple of options. We're going to use the single project board, which is pretty simple. The board represents a project. Each line item in that board is a task for that project. Our board's going to be created here for us in a second. You'll notice each item is a task. Each group is a phase. We're really going to be focused on our columns, which is where we're actually going to track time in Monday.com. So you'll notice the first option is actually already pre-built into this board. It's the effort spent column here. What you're going to notice is just a numbers column. So pretty simple to add. If you hit the plus button on the right-hand corner of the board, you can use a numbers column here. You just select it. It's going to give you a column, which you can then rename to effort spent, or time spent, whatever language that you use. The limitation with the numbers column is you'll notice you're really limited to just one entry. If you want more entries, you're going to have to do mental math to get to the total. So if I were to add 2 hours here, I have to add 8 plus 2 to get 10. It's not ideal, not recommended unless you're just simply putting in one number one time. The second option that you have to track time in Monday is going to be another column. So if I click the plus button and I search for the time tracking column, you'll notice when we select it, it's going to go ahead and pop up. With this column, you have 3 ways to actually track time. You can start and stop a timer. Users can come in here and add sessions manually. You're able to add multiple sessions pretty easily. And you'll notice it's going to sum those sessions together so you get your total. And the third way is to automate the time tracking process. So if I click into the automation center and I jump over to the templates, when the search bar appears, we're going to search for time tracking. It's going to give us a few different options which you can play around with. They're just different triggers it's mostly a status column to control when the timer is going to start and stop. So we're actually going to use this one on the left here, which covers both ends of that, the starting and stopping. So you just choose your status column that you want to be the trigger here. We just have one. When it changes to working on it, that's when we're going to start our time tracking column. And when it changes to done, that's when we're going to stop it. So we'll go ahead and add that, and we're going to see it in action. So if we look down for a future step here, task 5, when we change that to working on it, we're going to see our time tracking kick off here. When this changes to done, our time tracking is going to stop. So you have a little bit more flexibility when using the time tracking column. There are still limitations here. I wouldn't recommend time tracking if you have multiple people assigned to the tasks that both need to log their time to that task. We're going to get a better option for that here in a second, but it creates difficulties from a reporting perspective, which we'll talk about in a second. Something I would also recommend if you do want to create reports based off of this time is to actually also add a formula column for the time tracking as well. So when we add that formula column, our formula is just going to be a column. We're going to scroll down to that time tracking column, hit the drop down caret, and you can choose which you want to use here to showcase that time. Obviously, the most common being hours. So you're going to notice, oh, it looks like that didn't save. So we'll go back, time tracking. This is going to be hours, set the formula. Now it's going to pull the amount of hours that are being worked in this time tracking column. There's more formulas you can do if you want to round this down to get a more specific hour, but we're not going to focus on that for right now. You'll notice the reason we want to use a formula column here is when it comes to reporting. So if I jump to the project dashboard that's pre-built into this template here, what I'm going to do is add a chart widget to show you the differences between using just the time tracking column to report or the formula column in addition to it. So we're actually going to jump into the settings here. Our x-axis is going to be, let's say, going to be an owner. And let's say that we want our y-axis to be, not sub-items. The y-axis, maybe we want to do our planned effort against our regular time tracking. We're actually going to maybe do status instead of person. But what we're going to notice is it's a little off, whereas this is simply just hours. This actually goes up and treats this almost like it's 8,000 hours, when in reality it should be much less. So you'll notice if we go toggle between time tracking based off of the time tracking column versus that formula column indicated by this function symbol here, it's going to look a little bit better. Notice the graph, the scale is not as stretched out because the way the dashboards work, it reads the function column a little bit better than that time tracking column. So again, when using the time tracking column, it's always recommended to have a formula column that accommodates that or accompanies that so that it makes your reporting a little bit easier. You can always collapse this as well so that your other users, your individual contributors that are logging their time don't have to worry about anything extra in the board except what's necessary to them, right? This formula column, which is hidden now, exists solely for reporting purposes. So as mentioned, these are the two options that you have for tracking time at the board level, the numbers column, the time tracking column. You'll notice we can implement these strategies in any case, whether it's again a request, an order, project. So now I switched over to my portfolio view where each line item is a project, and we can actually add a time tracking column directly on this project board. It really just matters how your team tracks time, how you want to track time going forward. The function of that column is going to be the same, right? Same idea as if we were to use the numbers column in this instance, right? So we've gone through two examples so far, tracking time at the task level, tracking time at the project level, both through columns. Now I'm going to show you how we can create a separate board to actually track time entries as well. And this is going to give you the most flexibility. So I'm going to create this board from scratch. We're going to click the blue button, hit new board, start from scratch. We're going to call this our time tracking board. Each line item will represent a time entry. We're going to go ahead and create that board. So now the board has loaded for us. Each line item moving horizontally across the screen here is going to be a time entry. So we'll rename it so we know what we're talking about. We'll just do the first couple. So that's time entry 1, 2, and 3. You can then choose how you might want to group these. It can be, if you have an approval process, maybe it's like new entries or those that have been approved. If you don't do time entry approval, it can just be one group, and you can, of course, click the three dots here, get rid of the second group, really make this board your own, though. So we'll change the color here. And then from there, it's seeing the information related to the time entries that you need to track. So of course, it's going to be the person tracking the time. Maybe if you are doing approvals, you have a status column or a label column where it's review and approved. Right? So all of these will be need review. Date column will be the date of submission. Not very common to have a files column here, so we'll get rid of it. We can click the three dots, click delete, get rid of our files column. And then we'll add in a numbers column. This is going to be for the time worked. You can pick your unit. Often teams will use hours here. You can use minutes, seconds, whatever you prefer. Then, you can incorporate any other type of data that you might need somebody to submit. What is a important piece of this time tracking board is going to be the connected boards column. So the connected boards column is going to allow us to associate a task or a project that is associated with that time entry. So it's very easy to implement this. This is just another piece of data. So therefore, it's just clicking the plus button, accessing the column center. It's under the super useful categorization under the pre-suggested column types when clicking that plus button initially. We'll go ahead and use connect boards column. It's then going to prompt us to select the board that we want to connect to. So we're actually going to connect to both. When implementing this strategy, you're likely going to do one or the other, depending on how your team tracks time. For example, if you track time at the project level, you'll select the portfolio view here as the board that you're going to connect to. Or if it's at the task level, you're going to connect to your project board or your project template if you have multiple projects, so that you just have to build out the time tracking once. So it's going to prompt us to select the boards that we want to track to. In this case, we're going to do both. So we're going to do the portfolio view as well as the single project. We're going to create a two-way connection. We're going to connect boards. And then we're not going to add a mirror column. What that means is there any task information or any project information outside of the names that you want to see on the time entry? You can always add it later if need be. Once that connection is established, you'll notice in that column, you have the option to, if multiple boards selected, choose the board in which you want to log that time entry against. Is it the portfolio view where I have my projects and I want to log time against my projects? Or is it that single project where I want to log time against my different tasks? So I'm just going to put that in as an example. We'll put in, some hours worked. So now for time entry 1, it's going to show, okay, for task 1, I worked for 5 hours on January 9th. And, of course, you can have the person that's assigned to the time entry here as well. So now when I go to the single project, because we did the two-way connection when setting up the connected boards column, you're going to notice we now have the ability to see that time entry on task 1. And what you can even do here is add in a mirror column, that column that was prompted on the previous board. It's going to ask what connect boards column do we want to mirror in information from. It's the link to the time tracking board, and maybe we want to pull in the time worked and show a summary as a sum if we have multiple entries here. So as you remember, time entry 1, we had 5 hours. Now that's showing for task 1, we worked for 5 hours. So this is going to be time spent. So now we have our time tracking board built out here. You may want to add a few different automations to make your life a little bit easier. Not only automations, but maybe default columns. So default columns, maybe every time an entry is submitted, the default item value should be needs review. That way, when new time entries are created, you don't even have to change that status column. It's just going to automatically show up as needs review. The second one I might recommend adding as well is the automatic assignment of the creation of an item. So we can use this one here. It says when an item is created, assign the person as creator. So that way somebody's logging time, they don't need to always put themselves as the person logging it. They'll do it for them automatically. So there's a few different ways that you can actually log time in this time tracking board. First, you can, of course, just use your standard ways of creating items in Monday. Type it in the group that you want it to be a part of, or you can use this blue button at the top left-hand corner here. Worked on XYZ. Notice our automation ran, so it automatically assigns me as the person. The status is needs review. I can add in when I'm logging this time to. So maybe I worked in the past and I worked for 4 hours and I want to work on task 2. Actually, not task 2, we'll do task 1 so that we can see an example of the aggregated number here. So if we go back to our single project board on task 1, notice we have multiple entries and it's now 9 hours. The final way that you can actually log time entries into this board is through a Monday form. So you may already be aware of adding views and forms in Monday.com. So a form can be added just by clicking that plus button in the top left-hand corner here. You can customize the form to make the experience a little bit more familiar to your business, but I'm not going to go through the practice of actually creating that form. We'll have other videos for that, but it essentially works the same where you can say, okay, I actually do need to add the sensitive question type, which is going to be our connect boards question. This is something in Monday Labs where you can actually as a question on your form, the answer to that question can be data or items from another board, meaning a user on a form can just go in and select tasks from another board as responses to a question. So it can be, what did you work on as a question. We're going to make sure that all of these questions we're not hiding. Date of submission. Today is the default date. We can actually hide the status because we don't need people to answer that. Person is going to be answered first automatically. So now we can go ahead and preview this. And perfect. So now when users come in to log time, date of submission, they just have to put in the hours worked and then select what they're working on. Okay, are we logging it to a project logging it to a project at a high level, or is they tasks in the project that we want to log to? We'll again do task 1. It can be submitted, and then now there it is, a line on your board associated with task 1. So what's great about the form is it can be used pretty much anywhere. It can be accessed via a phone. Users can create it as an app on their phone, so they just click the app and it brings them to this form where they just submit time through. Much easier than obviously coming into monday.com and having to log it manually, and it makes it much more accessible, especially when on the go, if you're logging time in that way. From here, you can report on all of this time information through a dashboard. So, of course, everyone knows about Monday dashboards. Let's say that this is our time tracking dashboard. And very easy to log time just based on the time tracking dashboard, on the time tracking board. So you can come in here and create whatever type of widgets that you need. So I can create a very simple one. We'll do a chart widget where the x-axis is going to be the person assigned and our y-axis may be the time worked. Notice it's just me, so that's time worked per person. Maybe we want to do it based on date, so maybe we do another chart widget, but instead of it being the y-axis, of course, still time worked, but instead of the x-axis being a person, the x-axis can be the date of submission, and you can group it by whatever you'd like. So maybe weeks, and it's going to show me time logged week over week. Maybe we do a numbers column that's going to show us total time this month that we've worked. So we can say, okay, show us time worked, and filter it. Show us only where the date of submission is this month. This will be time worked this month. So you can create widgets for whatever time tracking data that you can need. You can generate a lot of actionable insights based on the time tracking data, but hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about building this workflow. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more monday.com tips. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me either via email or any of my socials linked below this video.